at some point this weekend since I wrote him a wonderful script and he just threw it in the air yesterday. We are so excited to have you all here tonight. I am Kramer. I'm Director of Operations here at the museum. And I have to tell you, Paul did a wonderful job of talking about how special you are because you donated significant amounts of money to this project. And obviously, this project never would have happened without those donations. But I look around this room and I see people who are special for a completely different reason. Can I see a show of hands if you have volunteered a significant amount of hours at this museum? Can I see a show of, keep your hands in the air, can I see a show of hands of spouses of people who have volunteered a significant amount of hours to this museum? If you look at that, you see that it is almost every single table. And I have to tell you, even though this is a week in which you are expected to be treated like kings and queens and thanked for all of your hard work, I look at these tables and I think, he volunteered here this week. He volunteered here this week. She volunteered here today. And she volunteered 40 hours this week. And so I have to tell you, we are so grateful. This place was built on the blood, sweat, and tears of people like yourselves. This was a piece of open farmland, and now it is a genuine, bona fide railroad museum and one of the best in the country. So please give yourselves a round of applause for that. We have a special treat tonight that is way better than listening to me talk, and it's way better than listening to Paul talk. We have an expert on this locomotive here tonight, Jeff Taylor, who is the curator of rolling stock and equipment here, and as responsible as anybody within a 1,500-mile radius for putting this locomotive into the shape she's in. Please welcome Jeff Taylor.
Rob, I feel so underdressed. Am I keeping you, Paul, for next song?
Just do the old-fashioned beat or whatever you want. Yeah.
If any of you, thanks, Mom. She's got an example of it. If any of you attended my other slideshow presentation that I did. If you were here in February when I did my other Red Cocktails presentation, I did a slideshow very similar. This is a much shorter version and is basically everything after we did our, after my last presentation. So this will go kind of quick and I'll try not to talk too fast because I have a tendency to do that. So the pictures you see behind me, the one on my right, is a photograph of the 20 when I first saw it earlier in 2019 when I went to go visit and work at Strasburg for a couple of weeks to help get the locomotive finished. And you can imagine my disappointment to walk in and see that. The boiler on blocks behind the locomotive and frame, and just parts everywhere. And I'm not joking, everywhere. They were all over the shop. And then there's a baggage car behind the shop full of more parts. Versus the other photograph was basically at the end of my last presentation in February. That's what the locomotive looked like as of February 2020. So she's come a long way since I saw it in 2019. Beep. Since February, what we've been able to do is just concentrate on the locomotive, continue with the air brake piping and electrical work. Here you see two pictures of the interior of the cab. And you see a lot of the air brake piping. You see the gauges mounted in there for the first time. We did some test fitting of those. We ended up using a couple of different gauges than we had planned on. One of them didn't look right. It was actually out of a diesel. And then the duplex gauge for the air brakes was donated by Phil Johnson of the Georgetown Loop. He came down to tinker with some of the gauges that I had that I wanted to use instead. And he said, I've got one that looks good. And I said, ooh. It also is from New York Air Brakes, so it's kind of got a cool connection since 20's from those connected locomotive works, just a fun connection there. But a lot of stuff we did was just to catch up before we needed to in the cab and get more of the plumbing done. And it looks like a mess of spaghetti, and it kind of is. You put one pipe in, and you go, yeah, it works, and you do an air test, and you think, great, great. And the next week you go, I want to work on this section, and then you go, but I have to take everything out I just did. Yeah. Next slide. Here we see the cab roof as well as the cab floor. The cab roof doesn't look like there's much there because there isn't in this particular photo. We were mocking up the roof hatch. She doesn't have a typical folding hinged roof hatch like most locomotives. I really don't know why, because she did at one point early in her life, and then they changed it to this design, which slides forward and back, and it is a lot harder to use, and there was no evidence of a handle to move it. So I guess you had to go out on the roof and move it. In later years, they left it open and just put a piece of sheet metal over the hole that's in the roof just to keep the cinders out. Probably because it got impossible to move it. But Norm Acker, one of my volunteers, was working on getting the oak material milled out and cut to size. And we didn't have any of the old, basically none of the old roof hatch. We just had photos to go off of, and a little bit of reference point, like shadows on the old roof that we had behind the shop. So it was a little bit of investigation work and detective work, I guess, if you will, and looking at photographs. The cab floor, we had a lot of remnants of the old cab that the Rocky Club had replaced many, many years ago, and we were hoping to use some of that and put back in the locomotive. But when we started to lay it out, it was just in really bad shape, so we made a whole new floor. That also was one of those, oh, that'll be easy, we'll just cut them and we'll lock them up and we'll copy the other ones at least as far as size and dimension and put them in. Didn't work out that well. We put the fireman side floor in like 3 times because every time we put it in, it was like one board short, or the gap was odd at the back, and then the other problem was a little black cover there. You open that up and you can shake the grates, and that didn't line up properly either. So putting in the cab floor takes a little bit of work. But eventually we got it. And you can actually see Norm's head poking out of the front door as I took the photograph. I didn't intend to catch him, but I got him in that one anyway. Next slide. Okay, so now we're getting into a little more noticeable changes on the exterior of the locomotive. By now, we've cleaned all the old paint off the jacketing, the steam dome, sand dome, the smoke boxes are ready for paint, and the tender is now starting to get primered and in preparation for paint. The picture on the left is the old smokestack saddle casting. It's the one towards the rear. The one in the foreground is the new casting we had to have made. We put the stack on the locomotive 3 times. It's kind of a funny story. It's a little annoying to us, but it's fun to tell nonetheless. We put the locomotive stack on shortly after it arrived and found out that whatever Strasbourg labeled it for the front was actually not the front, it was the back, so we knew it was going to have to come back off again. So we did that, and we tried to put on the correct hardware that we thought we needed, and that was wrong, so it had to come off again. And then the hardware showed up, one of the ears, the little tabs that stick out there. One of those snapped off while Dustin was tightening up the hardware, and we just felt so terrible. And we turned it around and looked at the back of the casting, and you can see it had been cracked for ages. So he just was the final straw. So we looked at options and ideas of how to prepare this if possible. And in Strasbourg, we found some ideas off of them. I found some ideas off of my other friends that are in the same business. And ultimately, I decided that it's not going to be as strong as a new casting, and then all I'm going to think about is what are the other 3 tabs going to do? They're probably going to break off too, and I don't want that to happen while we're running. So we decided to have a new casting made, and we went up to Western Foundries in Longmont, and they were able to work with us and have a 3D printed mold that's a one-time use to make a new casting for it, and it took longer than they expected, but when we got the casting, we did our test fit on the locomotive. It fit perfectly without any machining required. And we had set up machines and we were ready, expecting to do a lot of machining work to it, and it took 0. And I made sure that the foundry knew that I was extremely happy with their casting. So in the photo of the locomotive, that was the day we put the stack on for the last time. You can see how the new casting stands out. It's just beautiful. I love the new casting. They look so good. Shortly thereafter, I think is when we were about ready to paint the locomotive. Next slide. Yeah, we're getting closer here. So, picture on the left is the roof further along than it was in the previous photo. Of course, the track for the roof hatch is now painted, and once again we're test fitting it. This was after we had installed a sheet metal roof. It's a 22 gauge steel that's galvanized. It has a paint block process on it that it won't rust and it's allowed to get paint. Underneath that is felt paper like you would see traditional in a lot of equipment and locomotives. We don't know what 20 had for sure in service on RGS. It might have been tar paper, it might have been tin, it might have been canvas, which was one of the older options. We just don't know for sure. We know what the Rocky Club put on it. I opted for a tin roof just because when we paint it black, it looked like just about anything else that it would have had. Being tin, it'll last longer, and any cinders that land on it aren't going to burn the cab. So that was shortly after we had that installed, and you see the conduit on the roof, which is for all the electrical. We had it all finally laid out and actually installed. And Paul Mons, one of my other volunteers, he started all the electrical wiring, and that's what you see in this photo. There's the steam dynamo that runs the electricity to the locomotive, and he's running the wires to the locomotive. So, once again, focusing on the cab roof. That's after we painted it. All the wiring was done basically in the cab, and the photograph of the locomotive was the first time we turned the headlight on. We were able to hook up a battery charger to the electrical system just to do a test and make sure that everything works. We don't have to wait till we fire up the locomotive and then chase problems while everything's hot. But that was a fun moment where I was working on something else in the shop that day, someone else, and they said, hey, headlight, we're ready to turn the headlight on. I said, okay, let's go do it. And we all stood out front while somebody threw the switch, and we just looked at them, yeah, that's pretty cool. That was something nobody's seen in many years. Next slide. Paint job. This was something long leading up to that I was very nervous about. I'm the one that painted the locomotive, so if you see any flaws, you can blame me. We were initially planning to have John Coker, the railroad artist, paint the locomotive, much like he did with the UNT-50 baggage car and most of 491. And then COVID happened, so he opted to stay home in Georgia, so I had to end up painting the locomotive. We put 3 coats of Imron black paint. It's a really high-grade aircraft quality paint, and we had used that on 491, and that's also what we used on the UNT-50. It's a really strong paint, and thankfully very forgiving for a novice painter like me. I have limited experience with an HDLP gun doing some bodywork stuff for my car, so I kind of put my money where my mouth is. I've been saying for years that I knew how to do this, and well, I guess I do. But after that last photograph of the locomotive sitting outside with Stafford on it, she pretty much didn't come back outside until we painted it. So we kind of kept her hidden from everybody. Maybe we took it outside a little bit, but it was usually before the museum opened or after, just to keep it kind of under wraps, if you will. But we painted the tender first, and we got 3 coats of black on it. We waited to do the jackets because we wanted to have good weather, not a lot of wind blowing, dust and dirt and stuff around. And that actually was done in 2 days. The Imron dries fast enough that we can do second coats or 2 coats later in the day. And we did 2 coats on Friday, the 3rd coat on Friday morning, or Saturday morning, sorry. And then we were able to unmask the history locomotive in the shop. That same day, we ended up started stenciling the Sunrise logo on the fireman side of the tender. We had no plans to actually get it done that day, but all of us pitched in, and between the 5 of us, we got the entire logo painted on one side. And that was one of those moments where you step back and go, is this really happening? Like, wow, we're this close. Next slide, please. Yeah, speaking of, there's the tender finished on that one side. You can see in the other photograph, we've outlined the 2 and the 0 in the cab. The stencil we had for the Sunrise logo, we believe Jeff Ambrose did it, and we don't know for sure, but we think he did. So we were able to use that. We checked against photographs to make sure it was accurate, and as well for its positioning, to make sure it's exactly where it needs to be on the locomotive. To be fair, a couple of the rivets don't line up in the right spot. But I wasn't going to spend 3 months trying to figure out how to get it just right. What's interesting is where the rivets go through the logo, it's correct on the front side and the back side. So somewhere in the middle it starts to get a little off. But it's really, really close. And the way we did this was we, instead of spraying through the stencil, we laid the stencil out there, traced it with a welding pencil, and then took the stencil off inside of the side so it doesn't harm the stencil. And then we just hand outline all of the lettering outside. We thought we were probably all crazy. And then we all pitched in filling in the letters one by one. The smaller stencils on the bottom, those were done more traditionally. We put the stencil up there and we actually pounced the paint on. So we took a very kind of old school traditional approach. I do know that the RGS did have spray equipment because I've seen overspray on some of their coaches and cabooses, but I've never not seen it on the locomotives. So I think they might have been something too. We know Robbins Club did when they repainted the locomotive in 1947. So at least I copied what they did. And in that photo with the 20, that's clean outlining and hand-drawn line. Next slide. And the next week, when we finally had all of the lettering done in the locomotive, we thought, well, we're going to roll this outside. We go home today. The museum was closed. Nobody was around. We rolled it outside, put it on the turntable, spun it so we could see it in the sunlight, and we all stood around. I was sitting on top of the CNS caboose over there, just staring at it, all just kind of taking it in like, we've come this far. We're so close to the end there. I mean, really, we were all just standing around in awe of our pretty beautiful locomotive. And yeah, it's almost done. Next slide. So here's some funny photos. This is Dusty Thompson, my roundhouse foreman, lighting off the first fire we put in the locomotive to actually fire it up and steam it up. This was from the first day we actually ran the locomotive as well. We honestly did not have any intentions to run the locomotive that day. Yeah, it was always a possibility, but we really didn't have the intention to do so. The idea was, let's steam up the locomotive and let's see how it goes. You know, we'll bring it up to maybe 50 to 70 pounds and see what works and, you know, if there's any leaks or things like that. And we did that, and everything looked fine. Okay, let's keep going. Let's get it to where the injectors work. Okay, great, they work. Let's get the hydrostatic working and make sure the air compressor works. Those work. Now what? Nothing left to do but take it outside and run it. All right, let's go run it. Why not? You know, I didn't have an excuse to say no. I was trying to not be in such a big hurry that day. Dusty was kind of pushing it, but he was right. It's like, what's to stop us from moving it? Me? So that was the day we fired it up. The picture on the left is how do you appease a 121-year-old locomotive that hasn't run in a long time. That is a mason jar of lizard head snowmelt water that I collected last October when we took Goose 6 to Ridgeway. I arrived very late in Ridgeway, but had just enough time to zip on up the hill to Lizard Head. And right where the Lizard Head snowshed used to be, there's a small stream that cuts right underneath where the west end of the snowshed was. And there's still a box culvert mostly there. And I jumped out, and there was chunks of ice that I collected and put in there first, but then I just filled the jar out. So it's snow melt off the Lizard Head Pass. I poured that down the monkey tail valve and put it in the boiler so she had a little bit of taste of home. I also have a jar of Dolores River water that I'm going to give her every now and again to keep her happy. I know I'm crazy, but it's fun. Let me go home. Next slide. And there she is done. Amazing. That was the same day we fired it up and ran it around. She just looked really good. She ran really well. Everything was working just like it was supposed to. And I'm really happy that more or less Dusty kind of pressured me into running the locomotive over that day. So we ran it around for a little bit and then once again kind of stopped and just sat there and stared at it for a little bit. You know, we all just admired it in the evening sun. Paul was out there looking at it and he was happy. So I guess I did my job right. From that point on, it was just finishing up the last little bits of, you know, tinkering with things, a little bit of touch-up paint, which we still have some stuff to do, but as you can tell, she's done. She runs quite well. So that was a lot of fun. I'm humbled and honored that everybody's congratulating me. You know, I didn't restore the locomotive, I just finished it. That's all I did. Strasburg needs a lot of credit for all the work they did. I mean, they did a huge amount of work. They did the lion's share of it, and we did all the work to put it back together at the end. But thank you. I guess I could ask if anybody's got any questions. No? Okay. Oh yes, there are 90% of the 20 is still, you know, original fabric from the RGS. You got to be careful if you want to say original, like 1899, because then it starts to get a little more tricky. Somebody actually asked me that yesterday, and I kind of didn't have much of an answer for them. It's hard to say for sure what it is. We know the boiler is. Granted, Strasburg basically replaced the entire interior of the boiler. Parts of the frame, the parts they didn't replace. And then it goes down to smaller parts from there. The drivers could be, we just don't have any way of proving it, but most of what you see there is what you see in photographs when you open up a historical book that has black and white photos and that stuff's still there. Granted, a lot of her parts are off the other two engines that survived on the RGS. She survived the longest because she was able to steal so many parts off the other locomotives. But yeah, and I'm probably going to answer running into your train time. Oh yeah.
So I'll just mention too, small advertisement, if you want to pursue Barb's line of questioning, tomorrow's behind the scenes tour is going to dabble into the issue of original fabric with the locomotive and the decision making that goes into a restoration, because what does restoration mean? Look it up in the dictionary. There's about 3 different definitions to it, and you have to know whether you're taking it back to the original or to somewhere that it once looked like, or anywhere in between. And this project, as you have noticed, did not take it back to Florence and Cripple Creek number 20. So we'll go into that tomorrow. Thank you, Jeff. Ron?
It's time for a train ride.
Is it time for a train
I
ride?
think it's time for a train ride. What do you all think?
All right, well, I think you all know where we board trains here at the Colorado Railroad Museum. Don't worry, leave your stuff on your table. We'll be coming back here, but it is time tonight for a twilight train ride on a recreated passenger train from the Rio Grande Southern. All aboard. If you want to take your drinks, you can.